This series is moving along pretty quickly, folks. Now we went from my team, the Philadelphia 76ers, now to the top 5 all-time Phoenix Suns. If this is your first video you're catching in the installment, I got the link to the playlist series both in the comments and the description box so you can check it out. And for those that might not be sure what I'll add this list, what I'm doing is I'm doing an alphabetical order upload for each by city name. So I started with the Atlanta Hawks. I'm going to finish with the Washington Wizards. Just did the Philadelphia 76ers, my team. Now we're on to the Phoenix Suns. And also, for those first time catch it, I'm only using a player one time. So I used Shaquille O'Neal once. I used LeBron once. I'm only going to use Charles Barkley once. Spoiler alert, it's going to be in this list. So sorry to my Sixers fans that didn't get to see Barkley as a top 5 Sixer, but I'm going to put him on this list. And I did it that way to try to make it a little more interesting, to try to give other names a shout out. Because I feel like if I use Shaq as a top 5 Magic, a top 5 Laker, and top 5 Heat of all time, there are some players from some of those teams that wouldn't get the shout out they deserve. So that at least allows me to put more names on the list throughout the series. So with that being said, let's start with a few honorable mentions. We're going to start with the Dragon, Goran Dragic. He was taken by the Suns in 2008 to add some depth to their shooting. Once he got going in the early 2010s, he had a good individual run. Unfortunately, the teams he was on weren't that good to contend, but Dragic himself did put up good statistical numbers, and he was the lead guy for the Suns for a period of time. But because the team didn't do that great and Dragic was never a truly elite player, I only got him as an honorable mention. But he's at least worthy of giving a shout out to. Now we're going to go with another guard. This time we're throwing it back to the 70s. Paul Westphal. Now, some of you guys may not be familiar with him. You might be more familiar with him as a coach because he was a long tenured coach. But as a player, he did make multiple All-Star appearances for the Suns and is at least worthy of a mention. Not the main name that comes to mind, but at least worthy of a mention. Another honorable mention from those mid-2000s teams, we're going with Shawn Marion. He's a good defensive player and a good role player. Not an elite all-around player. He was the number 3 guy on those Suns teams, at least behind Amar'e Stoudemire and Steve Nash. He's at least worthy of a mention in my view. So I got him as my final honorable mention. Now on to the list itself. So we're starting off this list. We're going to go with Walter Davis. Now, he was during his tenure with the Suns, he was a 6-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, the late 70s into the 80s, and one of the more dominant players in Phoenix Suns franchise history. Well, he's not the main name that comes to mind. He never truly got them over the hump to be true contenders, but he was a great individual player for the time that it lasted. And some people might not remember him, but if you do your research and you're an old school fan, you'll remember you'll know who Walter Davis is. He was in Rookie of the Year 77, member of the Basketball Hall of Fame, and he was, so they're one of the forgotten greats in the NBA. One of the forgotten guys of his era, and an underrated all-time Phoenix Sun. Certainly worthy of a mention here. Now we're moving on to number 4. Number 4, I'm going to go with Devin Booker, a current Phoenix Sun, one of the better players in the NBA currently. Now, I wouldn't consider him an elite player or a top tier, but he's still an all-star and still one of the better players. And similar to Kevin Johnson, Devin Booker's a good player, not truly a number 1 option, but I got Booker ahead of Johnson, mainly because he's been more statistically dominant on offense for a little bit longer. Now, if Booker wanted to take a step up on this list, he'd have to improve as an all-around player. But I got him at number 4 as of now. But Devin Booker, good all-around player. Not the number 1 guy. He's always been the number 2 guy behind Durant. Before that, Chris Paul. But still a good number 2 option. One of the better Suns players in their history. Will he work his way up? Time will tell. Now, moving on to number 3, I'm going to go Amar'e Stoudemire. Now, Amar'e Stoudemire was that number 2 guy behind Steve Nash during the mid-2000s. Made a couple conference finals runs. He was a 6-time All-Star his career, 5 times with the Suns. People remember Stoudemire most for his tenure with Phoenix. He was the guy behind Steve Nash who helped keep that team in contention. He was great inside the paint for slamming the ball down. He was also a good presence on defense and one of the best players in that team's franchise. So I got him as my number 3 guy on this list. Now, moving on to number 2, I'm going to go Charles Barkley. Now, Charles Barkley for this one, you guys remember the trade was made. It sent him from the Philadelphia 76ers to the Phoenix Suns in the early 90s. And what did Barkley do? He immediately made the Suns contenders. They made it to the finals in 93. They were still in contention for some time afterward. But Charles Barkley was that it factor that took the Suns into championship contention. And then you saw when he left for Houston in 96, the Suns took a step back. It took a while before they found their guy to replace him. But Charles Barkley, even though it wasn't a long tenure, it was a dominant tenure for the time that lasted. And it made the Suns contenders. Only thing missing from that era was a championship ring. But that's the story of the Phoenix Suns franchise. Sorry, Suns fans, but that is what it is until that changes and you win that chip. But Charles Barkley, I got him as my number 2. The only reason I got him at number 2 is as dominant as he was, he didn't have the longest dominant tenure. Though at number 1, the greatest Phoenix Sun of all time, I got is Steve Nash. 2-time league MVP, got them to 3 conference finals during his tenure. He was the face of the Phoenix Suns franchise, but I put him over Barkley because he had a longer tenure being the franchise guy than Barkley. So that's the reason I lean with Steve Nash as the greatest Sun of all time as of now. And remember, he started off his career with them for 2 seasons. Didn't do anything spectacular. He got traded to the Mavericks. Then in the 04 offseason, the Suns made the steal to get him back. And he came in and was that difference maker. Because remember what I said about Barkley? When he left, it took a while for them to find their face. They tried with Jason Kidd. Didn't quite fill that role that they were looking for after post-Barkley. Jason Kidd then got traded to the Nets. He found the right fit. They tried with Stephon Marbury. Not quite the guy they were looking for. Steve Nash came in. He was it. He was that face of the franchise they needed that they had been missing for 8 years up to that point. And Steve Nash, like I said, multi-time MVP, great offensive player, one of the better guys of his era, one of the best players from his era not to win a championship. Now, the Phoenix Suns, hey, they've come close a few occasions, and Steve Nash was one of the guys that had them on the cusp on numerous times. But because of his tenure and the fact that he had the longest dominant tenure out of all the great Phoenix Suns, I got him as my number 1. But you guys can comment, let me know your top 5 Phoenix Suns are. If you want to throw honorable mentions, you're more than welcome to in the comments. Also, make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more content. Coming up next, we're talking about the Portland Trail Blazers, so stay tuned for that. And until then, Nicky Steve's off. I'll catch you next time.